The moment Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez looked Donald Trump in the eye, the air in the studio turned electric. No one moved. Not the anchors clutching their cue cards. Not the producers signaling frantically behind the cameras. Not even the audience. Half of them perched on the edge of their seats. The other half barely breathing. The lights were blinding. The silence heavy. As if the whole room sensed a line was about to be crossed. Trump's words landed like a challenge. Maybe if some of these young politicians learned their place, this country wouldn't be in such a mess. The moderator's hand hovered, uncertain. AOC's eyes didn't flicker. In that instant, the world outside faded away. All that mattered was the tension crackling between two figures at the center of a storm. Before the headlines, before the storm of opinions, there was only this. A single moment, a single stare, and the unspoken question. Would she let it slide? Or would she change the room forever? The city outside pulsed with the restless energy of a nation on edge. Inside the studio, the air was thick with anticipation. Every surface gleaming under the relentless lights. It was New York, but it could have been anywhere, because tonight, the stakes felt universal. The set was arranged for confrontation. 2 long tables, a row of moderators, and a carefully curated audience whose faces reflected every shade of hope, skepticism, and fatigue. At the center sat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, known to her supporters as AOC. She wore a navy blazer, her hair pulled back, her expression unreadable. To some, she was the future, a voice of the unheard, a disruptor in a world built on old rules. To others, she was a lightning rod, a symbol of everything changing too fast. But tonight, labels didn't matter. Tonight, she was simply present, her posture calm, her eyes sharp. Across from her, Donald Trump leaned back in his chair, a practiced smirk on his lips. He thrived in chaos, in the theater of live television, where every word could become a headline. The moderators, seasoned but visibly tense, shuffled their notes, glancing between the two as if bracing for a storm. The audience was a living organism, whispering, shifting, waiting. Some clutched their phones, ready to capture history. Others sat rigid, arms crossed, daring anyone to surprise them. The tension wasn't just political. It was generational, cultural, personal. Every person in the room carried their own story, their own reasons for being there. As the cameras rolled, the first questions were routine, policy, budgets, the usual sparring. But beneath the surface, something volatile simmered. Every answer, every glance, every pause felt loaded. The moderators tried to keep the conversation civil, but the undercurrent was unmistakable. This was more than a debate. It was a collision of eras, of values, of visions for what America could be. And as the night unfolded, one question lingered, unspoken but urgent. In a room built to silence dissent, could one voice really change the script? The debate had been simmering for nearly 40 minutes, each exchange a little sharper than the last. Policy points gave way to pointed jabs, and the moderator's attempts to steer the conversation back to safe ground were starting to falter. The audience sensed it too. An invisible line was being drawn, and everyone was waiting to see who would cross it first. It happened during a heated discussion on leadership and accountability. Trump, never one to miss an opportunity for spectacle, leaned forward, his voice carrying just enough edge to cut through the noise. You know, maybe if some of these young politicians stopped trying to go viral and started learning their place, we wouldn't be in such a mess. He didn't say her name, but he didn't have to. The words were a challenge, a dismissal, and a warning all at once. A ripple moved through the audience. Some gasped, others exchanged glances. A few even chuckled nervously. The moderators hesitated, their eyes darting between the two figures at the center of the storm. For a moment, it seemed like the show might move on, that the comment would be left to hang in the air, unchallenged. But AOC didn't look away. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded, her gaze locked on Trump. Inside, 1,000 thoughts raced, memories of every time she'd been told to wait her turn, to be quiet, to let someone else speak. The urge to fire back was strong, but so was the weight of the moment. She knew that whatever she said next would echo far beyond these walls. The moderator cleared her throat, ready to pivot to the next topic, but AOC raised a hand. Calm, deliberate, impossible to ignore. The room fell silent, the tension almost unbearable. Even the cameras seemed to lean in, hungry for what would come next. AOC's voice, when it came, was steady and clear. With all due respect, Mr. President, respect isn't handed out based on age or title. It's earned. And if you think my place is to stay silent while you rewrite history, you're mistaken. The words landed with a force that was almost physical. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The balance of power in the room shifted, subtle but unmistakable. The inciting incident had arrived, not just a clash of personalities, but a challenge to the very rules of engagement. The silence after AOC's words was so complete, it felt like the whole room had stopped breathing. For a moment, even Trump seemed caught off guard, his practiced bravado flickering as he reached for his water. The moderators exchanged glances, unsure whether to intervene or let the moment play out. The audience, sensing the shift, leaned in, some with admiration, others with skepticism, but all unable to look away. The debate pressed on, but the energy had changed. Every question now felt like it carried more weight, every answer a potential spark. Trump, regaining his composure, tried to steer the conversation back to familiar territory. Crime rates, border security, the economy. He spoke in sweeping generalities, punctuating his points with anecdotes and applause lines. But the room's attention kept drifting back to AOC, waiting to see if she would respond again. AOC chose her moments carefully. She listened, nodding at times, jotting notes on a yellow legal pad. When she spoke, her words were measured, her tone calm but unyielding. She didn't match Trump's volume or his theatrics. Instead, she countered with data, with stories from her district, with the quiet conviction of someone who had nothing to prove but everything to protect. As the minutes ticked by, the pressure mounted. The moderators, sensing the audience's hunger for more, began to push harder. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, how do you respond to the criticism that your policies are unrealistic? One asked, her voice tight with anticipation. AOC didn't hesitate. What's unrealistic, she replied, is expecting change without challenging the status quo. Every generation is told their dreams are impossible until they make them real. The audience murmured, some nodding, others frowning. Trump rolled his eyes, but the cameras caught the way his jaw tightened. The moderators pressed on, shifting topics rapidly: healthcare, climate change, education. Each time, AOC answered with specifics, weaving in the voices of her constituents, the struggles of working families, the hopes of young people who saw themselves in her. Backstage, her team watched the monitors with a mix of pride and anxiety. Her chief of staff, Elena, paced a narrow hallway, phone in hand, fielding texts from reporters and supporters alike. She's holding her own, one aide whispered. She's more than holding her own, Elena replied, her eyes never leaving the screen. In the audience, the mood was shifting. Some would come expecting a spectacle now, found themselves drawn in by the substance. A young woman in the third row wiped away a tear as AOC spoke about her mother's sacrifices. An older man, arms crossed, slowly uncrossed them, his expression softening as he listened. But not everyone was impressed. A group near the back exchanged skeptical glances, whispering about grandstanding and sound bites. On social media, the debate was already raging, clips of the confrontation spreading, hashtags trending, opinions hardening by the second. AOC felt the weight of it all, the expectations, the scrutiny, the hope and hostility. She remembered other rooms, other moments when she'd been told to wait her turn. The memory of her first campaign flashed through her mind, knocking on doors in Bronx, being dismissed as too young, too radical, too inexperienced. She remembered the night she won, the disbelief in the eyes of the establishment, the joy in the faces of her supporters. She remembered her mother, working double shifts, telling her, "Media, never let anyone tell you where you belong." She remembered the teachers who encouraged her, the neighbors who believed in her, the friends who stood by her when the odds seemed impossible. Now, sitting under the harsh studio lights, she drew strength from those memories. She knew this moment was bigger than her. It was about every person who had ever been told to sit down, to be quiet, to wait their turn. It was about the future they were all fighting for. The debate continued, the tension rising with each exchange. Trump grew more animated, his gestures broader, his voice louder. He tried to bait her, to draw her into a shouting match, but AOC refused to play his game. She answered with facts, with empathy, with a quiet confidence that was impossible to ignore. The moderators, sensing the shift, began to direct more questions her way. The audience responded, some with applause, others with pointed questions of their own. The energy in the room was palpable, a living thing that seemed to pulse with every word. As the segment neared its end, the sense of anticipation grew. Everyone knew something had changed, even if they couldn't quite name it. The old rules no longer seemed to apply. The balance of power had shifted, and for the first time, it felt like anything was possible. But as the cameras prepared to cut to commercial, a new tension settled over the room. The confrontation wasn't over. The real test was still to come. The moderator's voice cut through the tension. Let's move on to the next topic. But the words barely registered. All eyes were still on AOC, her last response echoing in the charged silence. For a split second, it seemed she might let the moment pass, might allow the conversation to drift back to safer ground. Her fingers tapped lightly on the table, a subtle rhythm betraying the storm of thoughts behind her calm exterior. Trump leaned back, a faint, knowing smirk on his face, as if daring her to push further. The audience shifted, restless, sensing the crossroads. Elena, backstage, held her breath, watching her boss's every move on the monitor. The moderators exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to intervene or let the tension play out. AOC's eyes flickered, not with fear, but with resolve. She drew a slow breath, her decision made in the space of a heartbeat. The camera lingered on her face, the world outside the studio forgotten. Would she risk everything and speak again, or would she let the moment slip away? The answer, everyone knew, would change everything. AOC's hand hovered just above the table, her fingertips brushing the edge of her notepad. The moderator's attempt to move on hung awkwardly in the air, but the room's attention was fixed on her. She could feel the weight of every gaze, supporters, skeptics, rivals, and allies, all waiting to see if she would seize a moment or let it dissolve into the noise of another political broadcast. She didn't rush. Instead, she let the silence stretch, a deliberate pause that made the tension almost unbearable. Then, with a calm that belied the storm inside, she spoke. Before we move on, I think it's important to address what was just said, because this isn't just about me. It's about every young person, every woman, every person of color who's ever been told to wait their turn or know their place. The words landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through the studio. Trump's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of irritation. The moderators, caught off guard, let her continue. The audience leaned in, some nodding, others bracing for backlash. AOC's voice was steady, but her eyes flashed with conviction. I was elected to represent my district, not to make anyone comfortable. If speaking up for my community makes me a target, so be it. But I won't apologize for refusing to be silent. A hush fell over the room, deeper than before. Even the hum of the cameras seemed to fade. For a moment, it felt as if the entire world was listening. Trump tried to regain control, interrupting with a dismissive wave. You know, I've been in politics a long time. I've seen a lot of people come and go. You have to earn your place. AOC didn't flinch. Respect isn't a trophy you hand out to the people you agree with. It's earned by listening, by serving, by standing up when it matters. And if that makes some people uncomfortable, maybe it's time they got used to it. The audience erupted, some in applause, others in murmurs of disapproval. The moderators scrambled to regain order, but the energy in the room had shifted. The old script was gone, replaced by something raw and unpredictable. Backstage, Elena's phone buzzed nonstop. Texts from journalists, supporters, and even a few rivals flooded in. She's trending, one message read. Clips are already everywhere. On social media, the moment exploded. Hashtags multiplied. Memes appeared within minutes, and commentators on both sides rushed to stake their claims. But inside the studio, the debate pressed on. The next question came from a member of the audience, a young teacher from Queens. Congresswoman, how do you stay hopeful when it feels like nothing ever changes? AOC smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing just a bit. Hope isn't something you wait for. It's something you build, one conversation, one vote, one act of courage at a time. Change is slow, but it's real. And it starts with refusing to accept the way things have always been. Trump interjected, "That's a nice speech, but speeches don't fix problems. Experience does." AOC met his gaze. Experience is valuable, but so is vision. The world doesn't move forward by clinging to the past. It moves when people are brave enough to imagine something better. The exchange was electric. The audience caught between applause and argument. The moderators, sensing the moment, allowed the conversation to flow, abandoning their prepared questions in favor of the raw, unscripted energy that now filled the room. As the debate continued, the stakes grew higher. AOC fielded questions on healthcare, climate change, and economic justice, each answer grounded in the stories of her constituents. She spoke of single mothers working 2 jobs, of students drowning in debt, of families struggling to afford rent. Her words were personal, but they resonated far beyond her district. Trump, for his part, doubled down on his message of strength and tradition. He painted AOC's ideas as dangerous, untested, even reckless. But the more he tried to dismiss her, the more the audience seemed to listen. The tension reached a new peak when a moderator asked about the threats and harassment faced by women in politics. Trump shrugged. Politics isn't for the thin-skinned. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. AOC's response was quiet, but devastating. It's not about heat. It's about respect. And if the only way to survive in politics is to accept abuse, maybe it's the kitchen that needs to change. The room went silent again. The power dynamic unmistakably altered. Even those who disagreed with her couldn't deny the force of her presence. Outside the studio, the story was already spiraling. News outlets cut into regular programming to replay the exchange. Podcasts recorded emergency episodes. Political analysts debated whether this was a turning point or just another viral flash in the pan. Backstage, Elena fielded calls from party leadership. "Tell her to tone it down," one senior advisor urged. Remind her she's not just representing herself. But Elena knew better than to try to rein in her boss. AOC had never been one to play it safe. As the night wore on, the pressure mounted. Security was quietly increased. AOC's team monitored threats online, flagging the most serious for Capitol Police. Supporters rallied, organizing watch parties, and flooding her office with messages of encouragement. Critics sharpened their attacks, accusing her of grandstanding, of disrespect, of undermining the very institution she served. Through it all, AOC remained focused. She met with her team, debriefed the night's events, and checked in with her family. Her mother's voice on the phone was steady, proud, but tinged with worry. "Mija, you did what you had to do. Just promise me you'll be careful." AOC promised, but she knew caution had its limits. The world was watching, and the next move was hers. The night after the broadcast, AOC's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Her team had set up a war room in her district office, screens glowing with news feeds, social media dashboards, and a steady stream of emails. The viral moment had become a national flashpoint. Supporters hailed her as a truth-teller, while critics called for her censure. But as the hours ticked by, something unexpected happened. A message arrived from an unlikely source. Senator Richard Halvorson, a senior Democrat known for his caution in backroom deals, not for public stands. He rarely reached out to AOC, and when he did, it was usually to urge restraint. But this time his text was different. He shook the room. "Don't let them make you regret it. Call me." Before AOC could respond, Elena rushed in, her face pale. "You need to see this." She handed over a tablet, the screen displaying a private message sent to AOC's official account. The sender was anonymous, but the threat was chillingly specific. Details about her family, her daily routine, even a route she took to her apartment. The words were clear: "Stay in your place or you'll wish you had." The room fell silent. For a moment, the noise of the outside world faded, replaced by a cold, creeping fear. Elena immediately called Capitol Police, who promised to increase patrols and monitor her office. But the sense of vulnerability lingered, a shadow over the night's triumph. As the team scrambled to respond, another shock arrived, this time from the other side of the aisle. Congressman Mark Dwyer, a Republican from Texas known for his combative style, tweeted, "Disagree with that AOC all you want, but threats and intimidation have no place in our democracy. We debate ideas, not lives." The tweet went viral, drawing praise and criticism from all corners. For the first time, the conversation shifted, not just about what AOC had said, but about the toxic climate facing anyone who dared to speak up. Allies and adversaries alike were forced to confront the reality that the stakes had grown beyond politics. AOC sat quietly, absorbing the whirlwind. The moment that had started as a battle of words had become something far more dangerous and far more important. The fight was no longer just about policy or pride. It was about who got to speak, who got to belong, and what price they would pay for refusing to be silent. The following week, the Capitol was buzzing with rumors. News vans lined the streets, and security was tighter than usual. Inside, behind closed doors, party leaders debated how to handle the fallout. Some urged AOC to issue a statement, to lower the temperature and let the news cycle move on. Others, emboldened by her stand, wanted her to double down and seize the moment. AOC, meanwhile, was summoned to a private meeting with senior Democratic leadership. The room was small, windowless, and thick with the scent of old coffee and tension. Around the table sat the party's most seasoned strategists, men and women who had seen scandals come and go, who knew the cost of stepping out of line. Representative Caldwell, the longest-serving member, spoke first. "Alexandria, you made your point, but this is bigger than you. The party needs unity, not headlines." AOC listened, her face unreadable. She could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on her, the unspoken demand to apologize, to retreat, to play by the old rules. But she also remembered the faces in the audience, the messages from young women and men who had written say her words gave them hope. She took a breath. "With respect, I didn't come here to make headlines. I came here to represent the people who sent me. If that means challenging the way things have always been done, so be it. I won't apologize for refusing to be silent." The room bristled. Caldwell leaned forward, his voice low. "You're risking everything. Your seat, your safety, your future in this party." AOC met his gaze. "If my future depends on staying quiet when I know I should speak, then maybe it's not a future worth having." A tense silence followed. Then, unexpectedly, Representative Lee, a veteran of many political battles, spoke up. "She's right. We keep telling people to wait their turn, to play it safe, and look where it's gotten us. Maybe it's time we listened." The words hung in the air, a challenge and an invitation. The old guard looked uneasy, but no one argued. Later that day, AOC agreed to a televised follow-up interview. This time, not in a crowded studio, but in a quiet, neutral setting. The interviewer asked a question everyone wanted answered. "Do you regret what you said?" AOC's answer was simple. "I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret saying it." The interviewer pressed. "Aren't you afraid of the consequences?" AOC smiled, a hint of steel in her eyes. "I'm more afraid of what happens if we keep letting fear decide who gets to speak." The interview aired that night, and for the first time, the conversation shifted from outrage to respect. Even some of her harshest critics admitted she had stood her ground with dignity. In that moment, the climax of the story wasn't just a confrontation. It was a declaration. The old rules had been challenged, and the cost of silence had been laid bare for all to see. The days after the interview felt different. The Capitol's usual rhythm, hushed conversations in marble hallways, the shuffle of staffers, the constant hum of news alerts, was now punctuated by something new. Open conversations about power, respect, and who gets to speak. AOC's words had become a touchstone, quoted in committee rooms and whispered in elevators. Even those who disagreed with her found themselves repeating her lines, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with frustration. Her office was flooded with messages. Some were angry, accusing her of disrespect or grandstanding. But far more were letters of support, handwritten notes from teachers, Emails from young activists, voicemails from parents who said their children watched the clip and asked questions about courage. A retired nurse from Michigan wrote, "You said what I wanted to say for years. Thank you for not letting them silence you." A high school student from Arizona sent a drawing of AOC at the debate captioned, "My voice matters too." Within her team, the mood was a mix of exhaustion and pride. Elena, her chief of staff, worked late into the night, sorting through requests for interviews, invitations to speak, and offers of security assistance. The threats hadn't stopped, but neither had the outpouring of support. The team met daily, reviewing security protocols and planning how to keep the focus on policy, not just personality. In the House chamber, something subtle had shifted. Younger representatives, inspired by AOC's stand, began to speak up more forcefully in committee meetings. Some of the old guard, wary but watchful, started to listen. The debates grew sharper, but also more honest. The sense that certain topics were off-limits began to fade. AOC herself moved through the days with a new steadiness. She attended hearings, met with constituents, and kept her promise to show up for the people who had sent her to Congress. She didn't gloat or seek the spotlight, but she didn't shrink from it either. When asked about the moment, she simply said, "I spoke because it was necessary. I'll keep speaking as long as it is." The world outside kept spinning. News cycles moved on, new controversies erupted. But the echo of that night lingered in classrooms, community centers, and living rooms across the country. People were still talking about what it meant to speak up and what it cost to stay silent. Late one evening, long after the Capitol had emptied and the city's noise had faded, AOC sat alone in her office. The glow of her desk lamp cast soft shadows across stacks of letters and notes, reminders of the storm she'd weathered and the voices she now carried with her. She scrolled through a final message from her mother, simple and proud. "You did good, Meja. Don't let them change you." She leaned back, letting the quiet settle. The adrenaline of the confrontation had faded, replaced by a deeper, steadier resolve. She thought about the cost of that night, the threats, the pressure, the weight of being a symbol for so many. But she also thought about the hope she'd seen in the eyes of young people, the gratitude in the words of strangers, the way her colleagues now paused to listen instead of dismiss. AOC knew the fight wasn't over. The old rules would not vanish overnight, and the pushback would come in waves. But something fundamental had shifted. She had not only defended her own dignity, but had cracked open a space for others to do the same. The silence that once followed moments of disrespect was now filled with voices, some hesitant, some bold, but all a little braver than before. She gathered her things, pausing at the door to look back at the empty office. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new debates, new moments where the easy choice would be to stay quiet. But she had learned and taught others that the hardest truths are often the most necessary. As she stepped into the hallway, the echo of her own words followed her. "I spoke because it was necessary. I'll keep speaking as long as it is." And in that quiet, she found not just resolution, but a renewed sense of purpose. Some stories end with applause, others with silence. But the story you just witnessed is still unfolding. Every time someone refuses to be quiet, every time a new voice rises in a room built to keep them out. For those watching, the question lingers. What would you do if the moment came for you? Would you let the old rules decide your place? Or would you risk everything to speak your truth? AOC's stand wasn't just about politics. It was about dignity, courage, and the power of one voice to shift the conversation for everyone. If her story moved you, let it be a reminder. Change doesn't start with permission. It starts with someone willing to break the silence. So, if you believe in stories that matter, stories that challenge, inspire, and refuse to back down, subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the next time the world goes quiet, your voice might be the one that tips the balance.